Hi Connection Christian, I am Brooke Neiswanger, and I'm going over Genesis chapter 9 and 10. Specifically, we're going to be talking about the descendants and the descendants of Noah. I'm going to start off with chapter 9, verses 18 through 29, which is the story of Noah. This story starts to take place after Noah and his 3 sons leave the ark, and it basically covers the last 349 years of Noah's life. So what we know about Noah in chapter 9 is that he has 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. These were the sons that would have created the people. Their goal was to repopulate the earth, scatter the earth, create nations, and we would all become the descendants of them. What we know about Noah from these verses is that Noah had been given favor from the Lord. Prior to the ark, he sought favor with the Lord. Obviously, he had favor when he created the ark and saved those who were faithful. And then we also know that there wasn't anything really worth meriting in Scripture after this instance in Genesis. So we don't really have a whole lot of information on Noah's life for the last 350 years. The other thing that we gain from this part of this scripture is that Noah was a man of the soil. He created a vineyard. He waited years and years for the vines to produce fruit. And when they produced fruit, he made wine. So what we know in verses 18 through 20 is that Noah's sons were given the favor to repopulate the earth. That was basically their goal, set forth for them by the Lord. In verses 21 through 23, we learn that Noah's a man of the soil. He created the vineyard, and he reaped the blessings that it bestowed upon him. So when the vines start to produce fruit, he made wine. And he kind of took these blessings to an extreme by getting drunk off of the wine. One of his sons, Ham, ended up finding him one night drunk in his tent, naked. He came out of the tent, kind of mocked his dad in front of his other 2 brothers. The other 2 brothers were really turned off by this and upset that Ham would do this. So they actually backtracked, back into the tent, not looking at their dad, covered him with some cloth and walked back out. And kind of showed the respect that we didn't want to see him naked. We don't want to acknowledge the fact that he was drunk. What we also learn is this drunken stupor was the first occasion in Scripture that highlights drunkenness. When Noah awakes from his drunkenness in verses 24 through 27, he curses Ham. He's so upset that Ham went and mocked him and made a fool of him. And this curse is the first time in Scripture that another individual has been cursed. And we don't know, based on Scripture, if this curse was fulfilled, but we do have an inclination that it foreshadows what the descendants of Ham will do in the future. So when Noah places this curse on Ham is the father of Canaan, who would have created the Canaanite nation, he basically curses Ham, Canaan, and all of his descendants. And what we learn, at least from my study Bible, is that this curse foreshadowed what God foresaw coming for that nation, because the Canaanites ended up becoming a wicked nation. A lot of their sins dealt with sexual immorality. So this curse kind of sets the tone for what those descendants will face in the future. But one of the big things that we can take away from verse 25, when Noah curses, "Cursed be Canaan, the lowest of slaves will he be to his brothers," is that the character of our Father, or in this instance, the character of Noah, portends the traits of future generations. So it just goes to highlight the fact that what we see our parents doing has an effect on what we'll do, and what we'll do as parents has an effect on our kids. And it's just a chain reaction that we have to be so cognizant of the sins and our actions, our language, everything that we're portraying to those around us. So I wrote down a couple big things that I picked out from this part of the scripture and what we can take away and learn. One of those being the importance of setting example for our kids. Obviously, Noah's actions set an example for his sons, and Ham's actions set an example for Canaan and the Canaanites. We also learned that sin exists in godly people. Obviously, Noah had favor with the Lord, but he wasn't exempt from sin. We can obviously overindulge in our blessings that the Lord gives us, and that can result in sin. One of the other things that we learn is our sin and actions can influence others. It can be our friends, but more importantly, it's probably going to be family that we influence the most because we're with them the most. So we just really need to keep watch of what we're doing and making sure that our day-to-day actions are glorifying the Lord. One of the other things that we learn is that even though the flood was created to kind of wash away the impure, kind of start anew and afresh with individuals that were faithful to the Lord, wicked people still exist regardless after that. Sin still exists in our hearts. It's engraved. We just have to be able to fight against those sins and temptations. And last but not least, we learn that lack of respect and mocking others dishonors God. And it also dishonors the person that we're mocking, and it shows more about our character than it does the individual that we're choosing to make fun of. My second set of verses is chapter 10 of Genesis, where we discuss the lineage of Noah's 3 sons and then the sons they had. So one of the big things that we know from chapter 9 is that Noah's sons went Shem, Ham, and Japheth. But when we go into chapter 10, it's reversed. We start at the youngest son and we trickle down to the oldest. So what we learn in verses 1 through 5 is that Japheth had 7 sons. There's really nothing too critical or important about that we really learn. In verses 6 through 20, we learn about Ham and his 4 sons. So one of the big things with Ham is that in verse 5, we learn that he has some notable, not in verse 5. Basically, just with Ham, we learned that he has some notable descendants. So he would have created the Canaanites. He would have also, one of his sons would have created and been the region or nation of Egypt. And then Nimrod, which Nimrod is highlighted in here quite a bit, talking about who he was and how he grew up. But basically, the highlighted portion about Nimrod is that he was considered a mighty one. Some even said he was a giant in his time. But we also learned that he was a mighty hunter. He was fierce for the Lord, and he directly served before the Lord. But past that, it's really the only account we learn about Nimrod within Scripture. And then in verses 21 through 31, we talk about Shem's 5 sons. And there's not really a whole lot that's highlighted with his sons either. It just kind of breaks down, what the names of the sons were, whose father they were, or who was their father, and then maybe highlighted if they had any influence on a nation. But I think that these verses serve more as a structure and a way for us to reference back in the Bible when we get further on and we're getting kind of confused with some of these nations, just to kind of point us back and say, oh, yeah, this is where this started and this is how it trickled down. So basically with these verses, we learn that all humankind derives from one family. We are all descendants of Adam. Noah's a descendant of Adam, and then Noah had his 3 sons, and it just trickles down after that big old family tree. We also learn that each descendant is different from another. They all had strengths. They all went off to create different nations or do different things. And with that, we have to realize that although we come from the same family, we all have differences, but with those differences don't have to divide us. And then last but not least, a lot of these individuals went off to create other nations. These nations would have created different languages, different skills. They would have learned new trades. And those are all blessings that are bestowed upon us by the Lord. And we can use these blessings to glorify Him. So that's kind of the big picture with Noah and his 3 sons and the family heritage that we all come from. And I hope you all have a great day.